Now joining me in studio is Tom Schimmerling with Schimmerling Injury Law. Today we will be discussing negotiating with insurance companies. Hey Tom, how are you doing today?
Good, how are you doing?
Good, good. So first off, tell me a little bit, how would you describe your approach to negotiating personal injury settlements?
Well, you know, there's all these sayings and cliches, you know, like FDR had the only thing to fear is fear itself. And, you know, President Teddy Roosevelt said, speak softly but carry a big stick.
Okay.
And I would say that that's my negotiating style, because I don't come right out, you know, get in their face. I think I've gotten so far over the years just by, you know, being reasonable and polite and, you know, talking about the case, talking about other things besides the case, and, you know, establish a rapport, relationship. And so many people, I think, attorneys will just get very, you know, agitated with them right away, and I think that's a huge, huge mistake.
Yeah, I like how you brought a little history into that too. I love that. So you brought up some good points, but what do you think is kind of the key to success with negotiating?
Well, I think, you know, as long as they know that you're willing to go to trial if you have to, you know, as I said, I think establishing rapport, making sure you know the facts of your case, of course, and kind of having an idea of what it is that you're looking for in the end. You know, what would be fair, what would be, you know, decent, helpful to the client. And, you know, a lot of times there's just not enough money there. A lot of people don't have underinsured motorist coverage, and they're kind of like stuck with whatever insurance coverage the driver caused the accident has. And sometimes insurance companies, they want to jerk you around, and you just have to be patient and, you know, deal with them.
Yeah, and you talked about, you know, jerking around, and I feel like a big thing is lowballing people, which happens more often than we obviously want to. So how do you kind of deal with, you know, insurance adjusters or even defense attorneys, like lowballing any clients?
Well, I think, you know, sometimes patience is the key. And, you know, you just have to very politely but firmly say, no, that's ridiculous, we're not. And I wouldn't use the word ridiculous normally. Once in a while I will.
If it's really ridiculous.
Once in a while I will. There are some offers that are just so off the scale ridiculous, you know. And just being firm. And, you know, I've tried cases in the past where, you know, they were kind of surprised I would take it to trial, and after that, those particular companies, I have a case with them, and it's like easy sailing, you know, because they, you know that what I'll do.
Yeah. Well, so like with choosing if you're going to take it or not, and saying, you know, the ridiculous kind of we talked about, have you ever had to get like really aggressive with any cases or anything like that?
Well, rarely, because, you know, it doesn't really get anywhere. You know, years ago, as a young lawyer, I used to do a lot of traffic court. And I would go in there and, you know, clients get tickets, speeding tickets, whatever. And I would get these plea bargains that other lawyers would be like amazed, like, how did you get that? You know? And honestly, it wasn't brilliant lawyering on my part. I was just being polite and friendly to the police who I was negotiating with on these tickets, you know? And so many lawyers just like get in their face and they're obnoxious and, you know, condescending. And by not doing that, you know, I found I was just by simple politeness able to really get an awful lot done.
Yeah, I feel like you talked a lot about patience, and just niceness really can get you far, which is a great recommendation for anyone with anything in life, honestly.
That's true.
And so what do you say to clients who are kind of anxious about this negotiation process?
Well, what I always tell them is, you know, if you're in a trial situation, there are calls that I have to make, but in a negotiation, it's always the client's decision whether to accept an offer or not. I can't call up the client and say, hey, guess what? I just settled your case for X, you know? You know, they get the final say. You know, of course, if the limit is $100,000 and I got an offer for that, then, you know, it's kind of a no-brainer. They're not going to say no.
Yeah.
But technically, you know, if the adjuster offers $1,000 to settle a big case, the client says, sure, I'll take the $1,000. There's really nothing I can do about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, Tom, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it, and thanks for all that information.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
Yes, of course. If any of you missed any of that information, don't worry. You can catch it later only on Around the Tiers. To watch this segment or past segments, you can go to WBNG.com and click on the Around the Tiers tab, then select Laura's on Call from the drop-down menu.